of meeting the mystical Monsignor?
Sure. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that my story is similar to a lot of people. I just knew I'd seen Albacete at various movement events, CL events, and didn't really know him for a little while until I was called upon to drive him somewhere. I think that's how a lot of people have met the Monsignor. And the thing I was fascinated by his talks, but what was really amazing to me was when in the car with him, he was so fascinated and I guess intrigued by what about my life, about me, about what I thought about things, even though he's a rocket scientist and he's on TV shows and things. I was immediately blown away by it. He asked me shortly after we got in the car about my opinion about the theology of the body, for example. I'm just a college kid. I think it was 2002, and we had a discussion about it, which I knew very little about. And we dropped him off, and that was the beginning of the relationship. And then after that, when I was at events, he would seek me out sometimes, and he eventually became my confessor. He's an interesting priest to get confession from, and I think that's might also be another very common anecdote here. But I just wanted to mention, a few things. He invited us, to me and my friend Rich, over to his house several times for tech issues, like fixing the Wi-Fi, or if there's something broken on his his email, or he lost access to it. I just remember that he would always seek out those people who just were free with him, and it reminded me this morning. I was watching the Albacete show, which if you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. But near the beginning, Greg Wolf quotes Whitman, and I literally on this last Wednesday was watching a film with a quote from Whitman, not the same quote, but it made me think of my experience of meeting Albacete, which is from Leaves of Grass. It goes, "And henceforth I will go and celebrate anything I see or am, and sing and laugh and deny nothing." And I immediately thought of Albacete, because that's the way he lived. There was nothing that scandalized Albacete. He not only did it not scandalize him, like the humanity, the difficulty of humanity and life just drew him closer to everyone. He was fascinated like a small child, with normal everyday people. This rocket scientist, and that's the story of how I met him, and maybe a little bit later I can introduce. I'll see if my son will come in. Little Pietro Lorenzo, who was born a couple months after Albacete passed. I unfortunately missed that, but missed being in New York for his funeral. But that's my story.
Beautiful. Dan, where were you? Where do you live? Where were you living when you met Lorenzo?
Oh, in New York City. I think it was 2002. Yep. I was going to college at Fordham University at the time. Right now, I'm joining you from St. Cloud, Minnesota, where I live now.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you. Mary, can you tell us a little bit about your encounter with Lorenzo and your some experiences with him? I think you used to drive him around a few times too.
Oh, I don't drive, but I used to accompany him around. I used to fly around with him. My name is Mary Szymkowiak. I am coming to you from beautiful, snowy upstate New York, Rochester, New York, where I've been living now for 10 years. I left New York 10 years ago. And I was one of, if not the first, I think there was maybe someone before me, but it was an official position. I was the first CL National Secretary. I worked for the movement from 1998 to 2004, when it was a one woman job. And then somewhere along the line, Ruro Maniscalco joined me. We had a little cubbyhole office that Albacete hated because it was beneath us. And then we moved, much to his delight, to the first office that we had in Manhattan, a big office. It was down on 21st Street, but it was a tiny little cubbyhole. And I don't think Lorenzo ever came there, but it was, and I don't remember the first time I met Lorenzo, to be honest with you, I don't. But I know that 98, 99, it's when all this stuff was happening, and we were making this big move in New York with Giorgio Vittadini's help and the help of all the people around the world in the movement to actually set up shop in New York officially. Prior to that, we had a kind of AirSats little office down in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. But this was a first official move. And we moved from 21st Street, much to Lorenzo's delight, I do recall, to Lexington Avenue. And, we were in the Gray Bar building, and Albacete loved to talk about how every once in a while, and me too, but Lorenzo loved that he would run into Henry Kissinger in the elevator, because Kissinger was up on one of the higher floors and we were on the 27th floor. And the Gray Bar building, if you don't know New York City, is attached to Grand Central Station. And it's a lovely old building, and Grand Central at that time was being redone. So it was just a lovely place. And Lorenzo loved coming to that office. He would spread out all his stuff in the middle of the office and pens and whatever, and then tell me things that I needed to do. I still recall many times, somebody mentioned it in the video or somewhere, his obsession with the weather. And he would say, call. Remember, that was the old days when you couldn't, CNN was on all the time, but we didn't have a TV in the office or whatever. So he would say, call LaGuardia, there was like a weather number. Remember that when they used to have weather numbers? I want to know what the temperature is at LaGuardia Airport, which I loved. It was one of his particular things that I thought was very cute about him. I had a great, I've been thinking about him a lot this year. With the COVID, with the whole political situation, I can't tell you how many times in a panic over the last year, I've thought to myself and talked to him and said, oh my God, Lorenzo, please send us some guidance, send some justice our way, send some calmness for me, because I really need to hear somebody with a voice of reason. And I was lucky because at that time, we were introducing all the books of Father Giussani. Religious Sense was introduced at the UN. And then we did The Origin of the Christian Claim. And I don't know if I remember this all correctly or not, but we did a big 3-day extravaganza at Georgetown University where we introduced, and there was a cardinals and people. And one of the people who was there was Cardinal Ratzinger, who eventually became Benedict XVI. And I love telling this story because it's classic Albacete and me too. There was like a cocktail hour or something before the first, like a little get together before the whole thing began. And there were all these serious scholars who were going to talk about the origin of the Christian claim. And Albacete and I were in a group of people with, I think Cardinal O'Malley was there, but I don't recall. But I do remember it was the cardinal before the current cardinal of New York. And I can't think of his name right now. It's escaping me. But a big old Irish guy, just like the current one.
Egan.
Egan. There you go. And Cardinal Egan was telling some jokes. And there was the older cardinal who passed away, who was never a cardinal of an actual city, but he was a scholar, older, very old man, Dulles. Avery Dulles, I think. Okay. And they were telling Irish jokes about New York City or whatever, and we were guffawing, and Albacete was adding his 2 cents. And Cardinal Ratzinger was talking to somebody else behind us one day to be Benedict XVI. And he turned around and he shushed me and Lorenzo. Okay. And Lorenzo looked at me and said, and I swear to God, he said to me, "Count yourself lucky, Mary. You've just been shushed by a future pope." That was Lorenzo. And I always care when people ask me about what I did in my previous lives when I'm here in Rochester, and sometimes we get into stories about Catholicism or whatever. I often share the fact that I was shushed by Benedict XVI. But Lorenzo was involved. It was his fault. Okay. And I did also, I just wanted to say 2 things about the video. I loved it. It brought me to tears when, first of all, for its playfulness, which was very Lorenzo. But 2 things really, really struck me. One was when Olivetta was talking about when she went with Lorenzo to see Father Giussani. And Father Giussani said to her, "Dobbiamo far tutto per quest'uomo." We have to do everything for this man. That's what Don Giussani said to Olivetta. And so I remember I was accompanied him on many flights. We used to have a lot of fun buying junk pens and trashy novels in every airport store, in every place. We used to travel all over the country. I got to travel with him, and sometimes I remember being like, wow, this guy is so not put together. You know, the crumbs on the thing, the cigarette ashes, the this, the that. You never knew where anything was. And yet when you agreed to fare tutto for that man, to do everything for that man, whether Olivetta asked me to do something or somebody else asked me to do something for him, you were in for an adventure. And he looked at you. He had a humility and a heart. You could be standing next to Benedict XVI, the future Benedict XVI, and Lorenzo was interested in what you were saying, as interested as he was in what Ratzinger was saying. And so that really struck me. And the other thing was Lorenzo was not my confessor. I do recall going to confession once or twice to him, and it was a hoot, I will tell you that. But I often struggled back then, and I don't struggle as much anymore, but I often struggled back then with what the meaning of everything was. And I think the dinosaur thing that it's at the very end of the video is the most beautiful thing, where he says, I honestly would believe if I was told that dinosaurs were created because this little boy Noah likes dinosaurs. And that's, to me, is Albacete. And I miss him. I would love to be able to call him on the phone right now and ask him a million questions about what he thinks about what's happening in our world. And I know he's watching over us, and I hope he's watching over me, because I definitely need him.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Mary. That's great. Okay. The final person I want to call on is John Capobianco, who is actually a good friend of mine. And the way that I met Lorenzo was through John. My husband and I are in the same parish in Silver Spring, Maryland, as John and his wife Maria are dear friends, and their family. And when John's daughter and my daughter were in our parish school together, in the same class. So we met in a very American Catholic way, through the parish school. And when I met John, we were both doing communications work in different fields. But the more I got to know him, I was struck that he had been formed in a totally different way than I had been formed. And my question ultimately, what was the question that you hear so often within the movement: where did you get this? Who gave this to you? And the answer was come and meet Lorenzo. And so John and I have been working together ever since, and that's the way I met Albacete. So John, take it away.
Thank you, Mary Beth, and hello, everyone. The video that John put together was really quite beautiful and exceptional. And to see everything that he put together really corresponded to everything that I know about Lorenzo. So it was something that you can trust and really rely on to get to know this unique and beautiful priest, which is how I met him in the mid-70s. He was assigned to our parish, as Mary Beth had described, and he was assigned there by Cardinal Baum in residence. And I was very active in my parish in college as a retreat leader, and I was at the rectory a lot. And my occasion to meet Lorenzo was very dramatic. He challenged me initially, asked me what I was doing as a retreat leader working with high school students, and then declared that I was a complete phony. And so I was, rather intrigued by his approach, and challenged and said, no, this was not the case. I assured him that I was authentic. And we would meet a few other times in the rectory, and he continued to pursue and to challenge me to, how serious I was about my Catholic faith, and with a great sense of humor. And then at one point, he became very specific, and he said, no, I'm serious, and I will challenge. The next time I see you at Mass, I will challenge you, and I will ask you a question. And if you don't answer the question correctly, you will have decided that you're not worthy to receive communion, and therefore I will not give you communion. And so I said, okay, you're on. Let's do this. And it took about 3 weeks later for me to be kneeling at the communion rail. At the time we were kneeling, and he was coming around, and he asked me, he stops and he asks me, and as he's about to give communion, and he puts Jesus back in the ciborium, he says, your hour has now come. And I thought, oh my God, what am I getting into here? How is it possible that we are at this point? And so he asked me, okay, so what was the council that declared the infallibility of the Pope? And of course, after 12 years of Catholic education and into college, I didn't even know what a council was. I couldn't even make up the answer. So I looked at him sheepishly, and I said, I really don't know. I'm sorry. And he looks at me and he says, well, then you can't get communion. And so he moves down to the next person at the communion rail, and I'm sitting there kneeling. And he goes down, and I'm waiting, wondering, okay, how am I going to handle this? And some other parishioner comes behind me and says, it's the Council of Trent, and whispers in my ear. And I said, all right, I got him now. Here we go. And so he comes back, and he looks as he stops in front of me again, and he says, so here you are, and your hour has come. So now, did you figure out the answer? And I look at him and I say, it's the Council of Trent. And he looks at me and he says, no, that's wrong. And he moves on to the next person. And I'm, by this point, all alone at the communion rail, and everyone has left. And so I notice on the other side, we have a kind of a circular communion rail. And I noticed that he has, there's one spot left. So I went to go receive communion to another priest on the other side of the communion rail. And so I went back and I noticed that everyone on the side of the church where I was walking, they were all tisking and wondering, oh my God, how horrible that I was treated. And they were talking to me, we gathered after Mass, and I said, no, this is not the case. So I went back to visit Lorenzo in the sacristy afterwards, and he was still vested, and he drops immediately to his knees in front of me, and he says, I'm so sorry I've taken this too far. I've given scandal, and I'm so sorry I treated you this way. And I'm trying to lift him up, and I said, no, Lorenzo, you are absolutely right. And you have nothing to be afraid of. You, from now on, you are the teacher and I am the student, and let's move together. And that was the start of a relationship that we had. And he looked at me and he said, well, okay. And so come and see me tomorrow. Of course, as everyone has described, I drove him everywhere in Washington as we kind of grew together. He had an enormous impact on my life. He changed everything. And the difference that, to me, this was before he met or knew Giussani, but he introduced me to Jesus Christ in a way, and with a passion and with a knowledge of someone that he knew and someone that he loved deeply. And so it was one of the greatest gifts I ever received in my life from this man who changed everything for me. So as a parish priest, we hear so much about parish priests these days. Lorenzo was completely authentic for me. He did everything that a priest should do. He prepared me for my marriage. He helped me to understand and recognize the woman that I would come to marry and would bear my children. And we would grow together. And he helped me to see that relationship in a totally different way that had been shown to me before. And so I shaped my life. He also became my confessor. He became my dissertation advisor because I went on to get a master's degree in religious education because Lorenzo helped me to see that after getting a degree in communications and wanting to share my life and my communication skills with the church, he helped me to recognize I didn't know what I was talking about after all this time. So he helped shape that, and it was really quite beautiful. And it was really in growing with him, setting up a company to specialize in Catholic communications and allow that work to shape my life. It has become and been my life's work, and meeting beautiful people along the way. And as he did, my last story is really going with him to Puerto Rico. And it was then that I recognized the importance of Monsignor Giussani in his life, because I visited him a couple of times, and I was actually, it was just by chance a visit when he was released of his duties as the president of the university in Puerto Rico, and we were there together. And we actually flew back to Washington. And there were others who saw this as a very difficult time for Lorenzo. I was just so angry at the people who had done this to him. And he was very, in many ways, calm about it. But it was really Monsignor Giussani who recognized the beautiful gift that Lorenzo was, and was willing to embrace him and ask him to come and be at CL and give his gifts there, where others were not as interested in that. And to me, I didn't know Monsignor Giussani from Adam, but I was like, if he knows how to be a friend and to love others the way Lorenzo does, then I'm all in with Monsignor Giussani, and happy to do so. And so this was, to me, a great gift. Not only as my friend Lorenzo was suffering at that time, but that someone would embrace him the same way was a beautiful thing to see, that friendship could be counted on, even when, as Lorenzo was like, everyone was asking what he would do at that time. And he said, well, people get closed down on Broadway all the time, you know, and they pop up in another show. So
That's right.
so I'm sorry to rattle on, but that's my two stories of how Lorenzo shaped and had changed my life completely. So, and I am enormously grateful for that.
Yeah. Thank you, John. All right. I think that we are ready to begin our questions and answers. So do we have a question, Theresa? Oh, you're muted.
We don't. So I really.
Oh gosh.
Yes, I encourage everyone just to ask your questions about Monsignor. He's so free, and I'm sure everyone here would love to answer any questions.
All right. Well, in the meantime, Mary, can you tell us what was your favorite part of the Albacete show?
I mean, it was all great because
Yeah.
it really, I mean, like I said, Touhey, I see over there. So this is.
I was going to say, I think we have John Touhey with us. So huzzah, John Touhey.
So this is me stroking your ego, Touhey, which, you know, but it was fantastic. And like I said, the Monty Python-esque scene changes, and it was just fantastic. And very much captured that playfulness that was Lorenzo, but also some of the parts are really moving, you know, seeing some of those pictures of Lorenzo and hearing his words from the letter that he wrote to Father Giussani it was very powerful. And like I said, I started crying when Olivetta told her story, because that to me really was the intersection for me. For me, I'm somebody who's been in the movement. I met the movement before it was even here in the United States in 1982 in Bologna in Italy, where I was studying. And I had the great opportunity to meet Father Giussani several times in my life. And the movement changed my life. Cial, the way the people I met in Italy, the people later on when we tried to start stuff in New York in like 1985-ish, I guess. It changed my life. That's all there is to it. And for him to join into that place was a beautiful thing. And it was like a completion of something, like this is my on this side of the pond. I don't have to call somebody in Italy. I've got somebody here, and it's Lorenzo. And so that was very moving to me when Father Giussani said to Olivetta, we have to give this man everything. You know, that to me is unbelievable. And I also really, like I said, I love the dinosaur thing. That's Albacete was completely non-scandalizable. There was nothing you could say or ask or put in front of him that would, you know, make his head blow off, the top of his head blow off. He would never. And so when this little kid says, oh, I know about dinosaurs, and Albacete says, yeah, God might have created them just for you because you like them, because he knows everything and he knows all time and space. That comforts me. Okay, I didn't know that story. I never heard it, or probably somebody told it to me. Probably Albacete told it to me, and I didn't recall it. But when I saw it today, it really, it's something that I will go back to again and again. That maybe dinosaurs were invented for me.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Dulce, do you have a?
Yes, I have a couple of comments. One of them from John Touhey. Let me just
So
Great.
we're going to go ahead and unmute John, and you can go ahead and ask your question or share your comment, John.
Thank you.
No, I was just going to say that the dinosaur video in particular is just one of the things, no one has seen that in 20 years except me. I followed, there was a point where I just got a video camera and just started following him around. I just decided I wasn't going to ask anybody's permission, and I followed him and Dini around and started filming them. And then these tapes sat in my, they were really like in my attic, and I'd forgotten I had them actually until we started, because I've been like telling everybody, oh, we want to collect all the materials, and I had forgotten that I actually filmed him. And so I started working the singing, and I realized I had these tapes, and I remembered that story. I remembered him saying that. That was something I remember for 20 years. And I was like, I've got to find that. I wonder if it matched my memory. And I put the tape in, and I was like, oh my God, it was exactly like I remembered. And this is really powerful. I have to share this with people. So that's why, I really wanted to end I was set to show with that, because I thought it was just so unique, so expressive of him. And then the other thing I say is, like, most of the things in there are either things that were very rare, that would be very hard to find on YouTube, or things that no one, like the question he had that they asked about, and then I cut all the the scenes of the past year in, about, it must have been easier 2,000 years ago to know Jesus than today, was something that someone had sent the forum, a recording of him. And again, so I wanted to really share all these, just a little bit of the treasures that we're gathering right now to let people know. So that's why that's in there. It is, so yeah, that's why that's in there. And I thank John for participating, and Dan Bushman had a special guest appearance in the video. So
I
it
just
was
want
fun
to
to
say
make. I'm glad everybody liked it.
thanks. So it looks like we have Fred. You want to say something? Fred Kaffenberger?
Sure. Hi. Yeah. So I heard Lorenzo Albacete in 2002 when he came to Benedictine College to speak on the religious sense. So that was, so I'm thinking when I went, I didn't know anything about him, but I had known Schindler before that, David Schindler of the John Paul II Institute before that, and I had subscribed to Communio for a couple of years. So I said to my wife, I said, okay, this guy looks interesting. He's been in Communio. And my wife, having looked at Communio, rolled her eyes at me and said, oh, dear God. And so I went by myself, and I went to Benedictine, and I heard him. I don't remember a thing he said, but I just came home and I said, okay, this is it. This is what we've been looking for. Let's go. He's going to be speaking again tomorrow night, and you're going to come with me. And she said, okay. And she said, I'm in protest, but I'm going to go. And she was nursing our daughter at the time. So here she is, dragging along the baby, and we're there. And she says, wow, you were right. And then the other thing that had happened was that I was at the talk in Missouri where Monsignor Albacete spoke at William Jewell College. And so I couldn't tell you a thing he said there either, except for one thing that I remembered because of the Albacete show. And that is, and I just saw him, people are asking him questions about the Catholic Church. He's giving all these crazy answers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. He was just doing this kind of stuff. And then at a certain point, he says, you know what really interests me? And then he starts talking about some animal he saw on the Discovery show. I said, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So that was, those were the stories that I wanted to share.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Fred. Other questions? No? Okay.
I'm not seeing any other runs right now, but
That's fine.
I'm going to take the time then to ask a question if there aren't other questions.
Please do it.
John, I was incredibly moved by what you shared about that kind of initial encounter, because in a very similar way, right? Being called out as a fraud was the way that I became Lorenzo's friend too. And I'm interested because I met him much later, right? I met him in 2000, well, in college a little bit, so that would have been around like 2000, 2001, but really got to know him a little bit later than that. But my experience with him was all after the movement. So I met a guy who had met Giussani, and I'm just curious, you knew him throughout, right? You knew him from maybe not as far back as Puerto Rico when he was a kid, but certainly as a young priest, all the way through his involvement in the movement. I'm just curious, from your perspective, how that encounter with Giussani took shape for him. How did he share that with you?
Sure. No, to me, Giussani confirmed everything for Lorenzo that he was always pursuing, but it never really crystallized the same way in terms of the way to live it, the kind of the method. He was always kind of searching for that. He was always very, authentic in his approach with Cardinal Baum. This was all before he was meeting John Paul II and they were doing things together. And, he was aware, it seemed to me, of Monsignor Giussani, but it wasn't quite like he wasn't really, studying or pursuing exactly what he was doing. But I think it was really meeting him through, the movement and kind of the introduction through Cardinal Scola and that kind of personal confirmation that this totally corresponds to the gospel. It totally corresponds to his understanding of who Jesus Christ is and how he loves others. And it was, to me, that relationship, that confirmation that this friendship is something that you can really trust and you can build your life upon. And so in that way, I think Monsignor Giussani became for him someone who really lived what he had been searching for. And that was really true for me when I met Lorenzo. It was, the church's teachings didn't really correspond for me. They were things that I had tried to build my life on, but it didn't make as clear a reference to, and this is clear not in the sense of a better understanding or a better example of how to live a morality, but clear in terms of this is someone I can give my life to, and this is someone who I can love, and who has shown me how to love in a way. And I think that's what he found in Monsignor Giussani, and it just continued to correspond. To me, the greatest story, I don't know if it's been heard, through the movement and stuff, but at the time, Lorenzo was spending time with John Paul II and going back and forth to Rome. And the greatest story for me was when they were trying to set up an arrangement for him to meet JP2 in Rome, and Lorenzo was supposed to have his schedule available, and they picked a time, and Lorenzo said, "I can't do that. I have another meeting." And the Pope got on the phone and said, "What? You have another meeting? Who else is more important that you should go to?" And Lorenzo sheepishly said, "Well, I'm supposed to meet Monsignor Giussani that day." And he said, the Pope said, "Oh, well, that probably is more important than the meeting that we had planned," which I just love. And I think Lorenzo was like, "Well, okay, yeah, this is." So it was that personal encounter with him. And the words, the unpacking of the books and the things, I mean, it's all important, but to me, this was a man who lived what the gospel proposes, lives someone beautifully in love with Jesus Christ. And what does that mean for today? And I found that in Lorenzo originally, when he smacked me down, and it was not a smackdown as to destroy me. It was a smackdown to kind of say, look, there's much more and you can pursue it, and let's pursue it together. And that was his offer. And I am so grateful that even as a college student, I was aware to say, okay, I'm in, let's do this. So thanks for the question. I think it's really important.
Yep. Okay. Do we have time for one more question, timekeepers? No, Stephen says no. Okay, so no more time, but thank you everyone for the wonderful conversation. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to everyone from the Albacete Forum who worked so hard. I know that through the creation of the wonderful Albacete show that John put together, that he was able to have some wonderful, amazing conversations with many friends of Lorenzo. So stay tuned, because we have a lot of wonderful things now in the archives, which hopefully we will continue to work on and be able to bring to you. So, okay, I have my closing script now that I have to read like a good forum member. We want to thank everybody for your participation.